We have some beautiful lessons in front of us today. You know, E.R. read one of my favorites. That text from Isaiah is the first lesson. I love the phrase, the lion and the lamb will lie down together. I remember Woody Allen once said that the lion and the lamb will lie down together, but the lamb's not going to get much sleep. Earlier this morning, before the first service, I was kibitzing with the choir, and I was letting them know that we were going to have church today, and I was letting them know that we had John the Baptist Day today. And Jan in the choir said, well, don't lose your head over it. Hey, that wasn't me. That was her that said that. Long before we had stuff like lawyer jokes, and long before we had blonde jokes, and well before we had three guys walk into a bar joke, and well before we had Oli and Lena jokes, we have good news and bad news jokes. There's a pain in the neck husband, you know how they are. And he's always so busy, he thinks he's the only one that's busy, so he never has time to talk very much. And his wife calls him at work one day and he says, dear, he says, you know, I don't have time to talk today. I got a lot to do, so whatever it is, why can't we deal with it later? She says, well, I have some good news and bad news. He says, fine, just give me the good news first. She said, well, you'd be happy to know that the airbags in our new Lexus work just fine. See, it doesn't matter. Here's a wilderness guy, John the Baptist. Caveman, wild man, eats locusts, wild honey, wears simple clothes. We think he was part of the monastic community. He has a phrase for the people. He says, metanoia, turn around, change, fix yourself, new you. He's not very patient with people. He sees scribes and Pharisees, and he calls them a bunch of low-level snakes, you brood of vipers. Produce fruit, don't be the way you are. And he says that they're going to be burned up and thrown into some fire. Let me ask you a question. Does that sound like good news to you? How many think that's good news? Got a guy screaming and yelling. Hello? Hello? Do you want me to scream and yell like you, like that? No, that's not good news, is it? What's good news about telling tax collectors and soldiers that they're going to stand before a king and face his wrath? What's good news about his message? You should have said, you know, I have good news and bad news. Good news is Jesus coming. The bad news is he's not going to like what he sees. I mean, his message was harsh. John was one of the last of what we call the Old Testament prophets, and he was speaking to people in this first century that had no idea about forgiveness. They didn't live that way. If they goofed up, if they failed in their righteousness, they had to give some doves or a lamb or some cash, and then they could have a better standing with God. Forgiveness was not a first century Jewish concept. What John did not know, and he couldn't know, was the guy he was talking about who was to come. I prepare a way in the wilderness. The guy he was talking about came with a different message. John was talking about changing one's way. What he didn't know that this person who was to come would say not guilty. That this guy who was to come would say, you're forgiven. That this guy who was to come would say, by grace, I set you free. That's what he didn't know. But what's lost in all of the conversation about John the Baptist, and we forget because he was just a screaming, yelling, crazy man. Later on, people said, what should we do then? They actually asked him, what should we do? Do you know what John said? Anybody know? Any John the Baptist scholars here? He said, if you got some extra coats, give one away. If you got some extra food, share it. In other words, he gave the people a prescription for a living that they could do, that it was possible. So in other words, he's looking at the people who said, listen, turn your life around. You know how that is, change, make it different. And here's some practical stuff you can do. We are 2,000 years after John the Baptist. The problem is, nobody's asking the question, what should we do? No one is asking the question, what should we do?
What should we do?
Hallelujah, thank you. Let's get everybody to ask it. No one is asking the question, what should we do? Thank you, I'm glad you asked. John gave this prescription, and the one who came after him gave it even more powerful. Love God and serve people. The answer, you got 2 coats? Give one away. I looked in my closet, I have something between 6 and 8 coats. Isn't that stupid? Got some extra food? Give some away. You don't need it all. If you're a business person, that's what you do, be an honest one. Be an honest, caring one. If you're one of the people who help this country in the military or as a police officer or as a fireman, remember, you're there to serve people. Serve and protect. That's what you're there for. If you're a pastor, for goodness sake, don't be a hypocritical one. Be a truthful one. Be an honest one. If you're a truck driver, stay awake. Drive the speed limit. If you're a child, how many are children here? How many are children? Baloney, you all are. If we are children and we are blessed to still have our parents, honor them. Honor their wisdom. If you're a husband or a wife, be a faithful one. Be a loving one. Be a humble one. And if you say, I am a Christian, for God's sake, follow what Jesus said. John said, turn around, metanoia, change. Yeah, we can do that. And the other thing we can do is to follow the example of Jesus Christ. We can love God and we can serve people. Thanks be to God. Amen. Let's sing together our hymn, O Come, Emmanuel.